Okay, so we can simply write str at 0th index is equal to username, any value for the username. Then at the second index would be the password value. Similarly, we can have for the email field, we can have any value. And similarly for the zip code. Okay, now okay, so I'm putting multiple values inside one single array. Inside one string array, I am putting multiple values, right? So if this say since the size of this array is 5, so we can simply suppose we've got another variable string city is equal to say London. Okay, so we can have this over here as well. Okay, so this is how you can put multiple values inside one single array, one single string array. We can put multiple values inside one array. So later on, when we will be reading the advanced topics, we will be actually reading the data from the Excel file itself, the values which will be there inside the Excel file. Okay, so so we will be reading the data from the Excel file and putting it inside the array over here. Okay, so now let's just see what is the drawback of the array. Okay, so over here you can see that if the array is of type string, if over here the array is of type string, then you have to give the maximum capacity over here while declaring the array. Okay, and if the array is of type integer, say if we have an integer array, I is equal to new int, then over here as well you have to give the number which will denote the size of the integer array. Okay, then you will have to give the maximum capacity for the integer array as well. The numbers, the number of integer this integer array can hold, this 4. Okay, so this is the major drawback of this arrays. And then string array cannot hold integer values. The string array cannot hold integer values. Similarly, integer array cannot hold string values. And similarly, if we have character array, then character array cannot hold string values or integer values. It cannot hold them. Okay, so arrays is for a particular data type only. You cannot store cross data types inside an array. Okay, so there is a solution for that as well. We'll tell you in some time. Now, one of the major drawback is the size of an array. The size of an array is one of the major drawback for the arrays. Now sometimes you don't know what amount of data which we will be reading in Selenium. You might not know the amount of that data that you will be actually requiring while you will be working with Selenium. So this is basically the drawback of the arrays that we just face in the case of the arrays. Okay, so now we'll see what are the features of array. Okay, that is, if suppose we want to find the length of an array. If we want to find the length of an array using coding, then how can we do that? So in order to find the length of an array, you can simply write str dot length. Okay, so this will print the length of an array. So when you hit start button, when you run your code, So it says that the length of the string array is 5, that we have declared over here. The string array can hold 5 different values inside it. So the length of this string array is 5 as it prints over here. Okay, so similarly we can calculate the length of the integer array as well, that is I dot length. Okay, and when we run our code, you see that the length of the integer array is 4. Fine. Now if suppose we want to print all the elements of the array, then you can write a for loop to print the names of all the elements inside that array. So we'll write a for loop, that is for int x is equal to 0, x less than the length of an array, x plus plus. Okay, so over here we are initializing the x with 0, since the array index, it starts from 0. Okay, because the first index is at 0, and then it says that the condition is x is less than string dot length. That means the value of x would go from 0 to the length of an array, 1 less than the length of an array. Okay, less than the length of an array. Okay, so similarly, so finally we can simply print the names as str at the x position. Okay, so when you run for the first time, it would x would be 0. Initially the x would be 0, so it would print the value at str0, that is xxx. Then when you run it for the second time, x would change to 1 and it would print the value for str1, that is yyyy. Okay, so when you run your code, you can see all the elements of the array are being printed before you. Okay, so this is the contents of the string array. Okay, it will print the whole array. Okay, so similarly with the integer array as well, we can print the values of the integer array as well. Okay, say suppose we have the values for the integer array as I0 is equal to 100, then we have I1 is equal to 200, then we have I at second is equal to 300, okay, so these are the values inside the integer array. So similarly you can also write a for loop to print this array as well. Say we write for int y is equal to 0, y less than the length of the array, that is I dot length, then y plus plus. Okay, and then we can simply print the array I y. Okay, so when you run your code, so over here you see that it prints the values of the integer array. Okay, now if suppose you want to print the integer array in the reverse order, that is last index should be printed first, 400, then 300, 200 and 100. Okay, so then you have to start this y with the length of array minus 1. Okay, that is I dot length minus 1, and then you can write y minus minus. Y greater than equal to 0. Okay, and then y minus minus. Okay, because the last index will be length minus 1, so we are initializing the value of y with length of the array minus 1. Okay, since the indexing starts from the 0 only, that is y would start from, since the length of the array is 4, so y would start from 4 minus 1, that is 3. So it would print the first value at I3, that is 400. okay, and then it will go inside the for loop until the y is greater than equal to 0. Okay, so now when we run your code, so over here you see that it prints the contents of the array, integer array, in the reverse order: 400, 300, 200 and 100. Okay, so now we'll see the two-dimensional array. In Selenium we will be actually using the two-dimensional array itself. So okay, so for that let's make a new class. Two-dimensional arrays, right? So inside this class also I'll just make a main function. And we can write console.read key. Okay. And I will just comment the main function of the arrays. Okay, so now we'll see how to work with the two-dimensional array. Okay, so the two-dimensional array, it will look something like this. I'll just show you. Wait a second. Okay, so two-dimensional array will look something like this. So it has got the rows and the columns. It has got the number of rows and columns inside it. So the rows and columns will be there inside the two-dimensional array. Okay, and inside each and every cell you will have the data placed inside the each and every cell over here inside the array. Okay, so the row number and the row number would start from 0, 1, 2 and 3, and similarly the column number would also start from 0, 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so to make a two-dimensional array, what you need to do is that we will simply initialize the two-dimensional array as string, then the array name is equal to new string. Okay, and inside it you give the size of the two-dimensional array, that is you specify the number of rows and the number of columns. The first dimension is for the rows and the second is for the columns. Okay, so this is how you initialize the two-dimensional array. So now we'll initialize the values inside the two-dimensional array. So firstly I will initialize my first array. Okay, now basically so now this is your two-dimensional array. So the cell at this position, this is at first row and 0th column. Okay, this is the cell at first row 0th column, and similarly this is at second row first column. Similarly this is at 0th row and first column. This is second row second column. Fine. So similarly this is at 0th row third column. This is then third row and 0th column. Okay, so this is these are the indexes for the each and every cell that you can just consider. Okay, so first dimension is for the row number and the second one is for the column number. Okay, so now let's just initialize our two-dimensional array. Firstly I'll just initialize my first row. Okay, that is first row would be at x 0 0. Okay, so I initialize with any value, say a. Okay, so initially I'm just initializing my first row. So the first row would be at 0th index. Okay, then we have, okay, the size of the array, the name of the array is this. Okay, then similarly we have for the second column you have the value, and similarly for the third column. Okay, so this is your data for the first row, the row number 1. Since the row number 1 has the 0th index, so the indexing, it starts from 0, right? So how it will actually store your data is that you have this as your array, always you have 4 columns and 3 rows inside your array. Okay, so since we know that the indexing starts from 0, 1, 2 and 0, 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so the first row, the data at 0th row and 0th column is A. Okay, so the A would be placed here. Then at 0th row and first column the data is B. Then we have the data as C, and then we have D. Okay, so this is how your data would be kept inside the two-dimensional array. Okay, so now I'll just tell you the practical use of the arrays as well. Why do we need this in Selenium? Okay, so firstly we'll put the values inside the array. Okay, so similarly, since like we have kept the data inside the first row, similarly we will put the data inside the second row as well. Okay, since we have 3 rows inside our array, so we'll just declare 3 rows. You just need to increment the index. So the second row would be at index 1, and we have the values as A1, B1, C1, D1. Okay, and similarly we can have the value for the third row as well, and that third row would be at index 2. And the data would be A2, B2, C2 and D2. Okay, the column indexing would remain same. The columns, we would be keeping the data, we would be actually incrementing the index of the rows. The column index would remain same, and the data is changed to A2, B2, C2. Okay, so now why do we use this two-dimensional array in Selenium? I just showed you an Excel file over here. You can see that this is the Excel file in which we have the rows and the columns. We have the rows and the columns. The data is being kept over here. Okay, so in Selenium we will be actually reading the data from this two-dimensional array. Okay, so you will be writing the C# code for reading the data from the Excel file into a two-dimensional array. So that's how we will actually be working with it. Since the data is kept inside the rows and the columns, so this is where the two-dimensional array would be used. Okay, so we will not be reading the Excel file cell by cell. On cell by cell, we will put the whole data inside the two-dimensional array like this, for the rows and the columns. Okay, and then we will be reading the entire Excel file. Okay, so like suppose I'll just tell you, this is, say suppose this is my test case for the login. Okay, this is my test case for the login. You have the data for the login over here inside this Excel file. Okay, for getting the data, you will write the C# code to read this Excel file. Okay, and then we will put the whole data inside the two-dimensional array. Okay, and then my test cases will be reading the data from the two-dimensional array. So we'll go into the details of that very soon, but for the time being, just understand that to read your data, this is very important. That is the concept of the two-dimensional array. Okay, so now how to print the two-dimensional array. Okay, so in order to print the two-dimensional array, I need to write the for loop. So for loop can print each value from the two-dimensional array. So we'll write a for loop. Okay, first of all, we will have to print the total number of rows inside the two-dimensional array. Okay, so in order to print the total number of rows, you may write, okay, console.writeLine, say, you can say rows are, and then you write array dot get length at 0th index. Okay, so this means that the first dimension size, the size of the first dimension, that is this 3 number. Okay, since we know that the first index is for the rows and the second is for the columns, so in order to calculate the total number of rows, you write array dot get length 0. That is, it denotes the first dimension size, the size of the first dimension, that is for the rows. Okay, so when you run your code, it says that the rows are 3. Okay, that is the number of rows in the in our two-dimensional array are 3. Similarly, we can print the total number of columns as well. Okay, that is array dot get length at first index. Okay, so it specifies the size of the second dimension, that is the number of columns in your first row in your two-dimensional array. Okay, so this is how you can just print the total number of rows and the total number of columns inside your array. Okay, so the total number of columns are 4. Now we need to print each and every value inside this two-dimensional array. So we'll write a for loop for int row number is equal to 0, row number less than the total number of rows, that is array dot get length till 0, and then row number plus plus. Okay, so we are over here initializing the row number with 0 because we are actually starting from the first row, and the first row has the index as 0. Okay, so now what this for loop will do, this for loop for me, the first time it will get inside the first row. Okay, it will iterate to each and every rows. Then now inside this for loop, we will have to write another for loop for iterating through the columns. Okay, so we'll write another for loop for int column number is equal to 0, column number less than the total number of columns, and then column number plus plus. Okay, and then simply we can print the data, row number and then column number. Okay, now when you run your code, so here you see that it prints your entire two-dimensional array. Okay, so what you have done, you have iterated through your complete two-dimensional array. Now let's just make it more clear. I'll just write over here and over here I just write console dot write line. Okay, so this, what this line will do, it will just move the cursor to the new line. Now when you run your code, so here you see that it makes it more clear. The data is being printed, the two-dimensional array, so it prints the complete data of the two-dimensional array in a more clear way. Okay, so we have seen the practicality of the two-dimensional array. We have seen single dimensional array as well, and we have seen the two-dimensional array as well. Okay, most of the time we will be using the two-dimensional array when we will be dealing with the test data. Okay, the only drawback of the array is that it cannot be determined in the beginning that what would be the size of the array, what would be the length of the array that we should be considering. Okay, so this is all about the two-dimensional array. This was all. Now one more thing which is left with two-dimensional array is that in the string array, this is the string array that we have declared. Inside this string array, if I want to put the integer numbers, if I say want to put the integer numbers, then you cannot do that. You cannot put the integer values inside the string array. Okay, and similarly, if I make the integer array, if you make the integer array, okay, and you try to put the string values inside this array, then you cannot do that as well. Okay, so for that, so now in order to overcome this drawback, I need an array in which you can put multiple types of data, because in my test data I can have a zip code which might be an numeric. Okay, so you can have the string value as well, so I might have some different kind of test data like that. Okay, so for that, what you need to do is that we make something like an object array. Okay, we make something like an object array as is equal to new object, and then we specify the size over here. Okay, so now what is this object? Object is an inbuilt class inside C#. We'll talk about this class in details as we move on with the course, when we move on with the later topics. Okay, so we will come to know what a object class is. Okay, so for the time being, just make it clear that this object array can hold multiple types of data inside it. Okay, so the advantage of the array of this class is that it can store multiple data types. That is, we can have, say we have at the 0th value we have one string value. Okay, and similarly at the second index we have, say, another string value. Okay, and then at the third index we have, say, any number. Okay, so it can store numbers as well. Similarly at the fourth position we have any, say, decimal number, so it can store decimal numbers as well, right? Similarly it can store Boolean values as well. Okay, so this array, as you can see, that it can store any kind of data inside it. This object array can store multiple types of data inside it. Okay, any value inside the object array. So this is about the arrays. We have the single dimensional arrays, we have seen two dimensional arrays. Okay, so how we used in Selenium, we have seen that as well. When we will be dealing with the Excel file, we will be actually declaring the two dimensional array. Okay, and then we have seen the object array, what an object array is. Okay, and while working with the Selenium, we will be actually using the object array only to store the multiple type of data inside a single array.